Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Today we're looking at and reading The Wizard of Oz by L. Frank Baum. This book specifically includes The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, The Marvelous Land of Oz, and Ozma of Oz. And of course, across the whole collection, you have a number of stories that basically show the full timeline of Oz from Dorothy along through the rest. Of course, this is separate to the Wicked universe, but that's the reason I'm sort of getting back into Oz and stuff like that. I find it really interesting. And yeah, I'd like to get a little bit more out of that universe, that world. And so I thought it'd be a fun one to do for stream because I think a lot of you videos, because I think a lot of you guys will be interested in it. So the Oz series, written by L. Frank Baum, is considered as one of the best in the genre of children's book series across generations. It tells us the story of the imaginary land of Oz, along with several other fictitious characters. The first story, The Wizard of Oz, is all about the adventures of a young country girl from Kansas named Dorothy and her dog, Toto. They are swept away from their house one day by a strong wind, which eventually lands them in a place where she gets accredited as a sorceress. She goes on to meet a living scarecrow, a tin man, and a fearful lion. By the way, if you hear anything in the background, I've tried to record a few times and I keep hearing an animal. I don't know whether it's a dog or a bird, which I know sounds weird. How can I not tell between? But either way, there's this kind of animal noise in the background. And so keep basically sorry. The second book, The Marvelous Land of Oz, tells us the story of a young orphan boy called Tip and his adventures. With a series of adventures that follow, it is discovered that Tip is actually Princess Ozma of Oz. The third book, Ozma of Oz, brings back Dorothy along with a hen named Billina. Dorothy is swept away by a storm into the sea while travelling to Australia and is separated from her uncle, Henry. Okay, so we'll read a little bit of the actual book. Here's an author's note first. After the publication of The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, I began to receive letters from children telling me of their pleasure in reading the story and asking me to write something more about the Scarecrow and the Tin Woodman. At first, I considered these little letters, frank and earnest though they were, in the light of pretty compliments, but the letters continued to come during succeeding months and even years. Finally, I promised one little girl who made a long journey to see me and prefer her request. Oh, that's a weird way of putting that. And prefer her request, or proffer? Is that what it's saying? And she's a Dorothy, by the way, that when 1,000 little girls had written me 1,000 little letters asking for the Scarecrow and the Tin Woodman, I would write the book. Either little Dorothy was a fairy in disguise and waved her magic wand, or the success of the stage production of The Wizard of Oz made new friends for the story, for the 1,000 letters reached their destination long since, and many more followed them. And now, although pleading guilty to long delay, I've kept my promise in this book. That was in 1904, 120 years ago. Crazy. Okay, here we go. Introduction. Folklore, legends, myths, and fairy tales have followed childhood through the ages. For every healthy youngster has a wholesome and instinctive love for stories fantastic, marvellous, and manifestly unreal. The winged fairies of Grimm and Andersen have brought more happiness to children's hearts than all other human creations. Yet the old-time fairy tale, having served for generations, may now be classed as historical in the children's library. For the time has come for a series of newer wonder tales in which the stereotyped genie, dwarf, and fairy are eliminated, together with all the horrible and blood-curdling incidents devised by their authors to point a fearsome moral to each tale. Modern education includes morality, therefore the modern child seeks only entertainment in its modern tales and gladly dispenses with all disagreeable incident. Having this thought in mind, the story of the Wonderful Wizard of Oz was written solely to please children of today. It aspires to being a modernized fairy tale in which the wonderment and joy are retained and the heartaches and nightmares are left out. It's funny, really, isn't it? Because there's a lot to unpick there. I could probably write a whole 10-page essay on just that quote. That was 124 years ago. You know, does that hold true now? People like those moral stories again. People want to see villains that. Anyway, I'm going off on a tangent. Let's actually read the book. If you guys want me to analyze that sometime, we can do that. We can do that separately. Okay. Chapter 1. The Cyclone. Dorothy lived in the midst of the great Kansas prairies with Uncle Henry, who was a farmer, and Aunt Em, who was the farmer's wife. Their house was small. For the lumber to build it had to be carried by wagon many miles. There were 4 walls, a floor and a roof, which made one room, and this room contained a rusty-looking cook stove, a cupboard for the dishes, a table, 3 or 4 chairs, and the beds. Uncle Henry and Aunt Em had a big bed in one corner, and Dorothy a little bed in another corner. There was no garret at all, and no cellar, except a small hole dug in the ground called a cyclone cellar, where the family could go in case of one of those great whirlwinds arose, mighty enough to crush any building in its path. It was reached by a trap door in the middle of the floor, from which a ladder led down into the small, dark hole. When Dorothy stood in the doorway and looked around, she could see nothing but the great grey prairie on every side. Not a tree nor a house broke the broad sweep of flat country that reached to the edge of the sky in all directions. The sun had baked the ploughed land into a grey mass with little cracks running through it. Even the grass was not green, for the sun had burned the tops of the long blades until they were the same grey colour to be seen everywhere. Once the house had been painted, let me read that again in the right inflection. Once the house had been painted, but the sun blistered the paint, and the rains washed it away, and now the house was as dull and grey as everything else. When Aunt Em came there to live, she was a young, pretty wife. The sun and wind had changed her too. They had taken the sparkle from her eyes and left them a sober grey. They had taken the red from her cheeks and lips, and they were grey also. She was thin and gaunt and never smiled now. When Dorothy, who was an orphan, first came to her, Aunt Em had been so startled by the child's laughter that she would scream and press her hand upon her heart whenever Dorothy's merry voice reached her ears, and she still looked at the little girl with wonder that she could find anything to laugh at. Uncle Henry never laughed. He worked hard from morning till night and did not know what joy was. He was grey also, from his long beard to his rough boots, and he looked stern and solemn and rarely spoke. It was Toto that made Dorothy laugh and saved her from growing as grey as her other surroundings. Toto was not grey. He was a little black dog with long silky hair and small black eyes that twinkled merrily on either side of his funny, wee nose. Toto played all day long, and Dorothy played with him and loved him dearly. Today, however, they were not playing. Uncle Henry sat upon the doorstep and looked anxiously at the sky, which was even greyer than usual. Dorothy stood in the door with Toto in her arms and looked at the sky too. Aunt Em was washing the dishes. From far north they heard a low wail of the wind, and Uncle Henry and Dorothy could see where the long grass bowed or bowed in waves before the coming storm. There now came a sharp whistling in the air from the south, and as they turned their eyes that way, they saw ripples in the grass coming from that direction also. Suddenly, Uncle Henry stood up. "There's a cyclone coming, Em." I was going to try and put an accent on, but I'm not. He called to his wife. "I'll go look after the stock." Then he ran towards the sheds where the cows and horses were kept. Aunt Em dropped her work and came to the door. One glance told her of the danger close at hand. "Quick, Dorothy," she screamed. "Run for the cellar." Toto jumped out of Dorothy's arms and hid under the bed, and the girl started to get him. Aunt Em, badly frightened, threw open the trapdoor on the floor and climbed down the ladder into the small, dark hole. Dorothy caught Toto at last and started to follow her aunt. When she was halfway across the room, there came a great shriek from the wind, and the house shook so hard that she lost her footing and sat down suddenly upon the floor. Then a strange thing happened. The house whirled around 2 or 3 times and rose slowly through the air. Dorothy felt as if she were going up in a balloon. The north and south winds met where the house stood, made it the exact center of the cyclone. In the middle of a cyclone, the air is generally still, but the great pressure of the wind on every side of the house raised it up higher and higher until it was at the very top of the cyclone, and there it remained and was carried miles and miles away as easily as you could carry a feather. It was very dark, and the wind howled horribly around her, but Dorothy found she was riding quite easily. After the first few whirls around, once and one other time where the house tipped badly, she felt as if she were being rocked gently, like a baby in a cradle. Toto did not like it. He ran around the room, now here, now there, barking loudly, but Dorothy sat quite still on the floor and waited to see what would happen. Once Toto got too near the open trapdoor and fell in, and at first the little girl thought she had lost him, but soon she saw one of his ears sticking up through the hole, for the strong pressure of the air was keeping up so that he could not fall. That is so implausible. I love how they've tried to. I love how L. Frank Baum decided he was going to try and explain how the house was lifted up by the hurricane, and like give it a little bit of science, and then just said, like 2 paragraphs later, "Hey, Toto's just fell through and then didn't because that's it." But soon she saw one of his ears sticking up through the hole, for the strong pressure of the air was keeping him up so that he could not fall. She crept to the hole, caught Toto by the ear, and dragged him into the room again, afterward closing the trapdoor so that no more accidents could happen. Hour after hour passed, and slowly Dorothy got over her fright, but she felt quite lonely, and the wind shrieked so loudly about her that she nearly became deaf. At first she had wondered if she would be dashed to pieces when the house fell again, but as the hours passed and nothing terrible happened, she stopped worrying and resolved to wait calmly and see what the future would bring. At last she crawled over the swaying floor to her bed and lay down upon it, and Toto followed and laid down beside her. In spite of the swaying of the house and the wailing of the wind, Dorothy soon closed her eyes and fell fast asleep. So that is chapter 1. I don't want to do over much on this because I kind of want to see what you guys think about this and if you enjoy it. If you do, let me know. We can do more. I'll gladly read like a few chapters next time and do a longer video if you think it's something you enjoy. So let me know. In the meantime, I hope you guys have a great relax, a great rest of your day, a great etc., all that good stuff. And I'll see you soon. Bye, guys.